I do not own Star Trek, or any of the related characters. Star Trek is a mark owned by Paramount. This story is a work of fanfiction and is for entertainment only. I am not making profit from this story. This is a tribute. All rights of Star Trek belong to Paramount. This fanfiction takes place between the second and third movies of the Kelvinverse.
Star Trek Reloaded. Chapter 3. First Steps into the Unknown. The Ducal had been a mighty ship, long the pride of the Vulcan fleet. Her primary role, as with all the other deep spaceships in the fleet, had been exploration, but the designers had not forgotten to heavily arm her. Long ago, when the Federation was only the idea of a few visionaries, it had pulverized a surprise attack by a race of warriors, the Klingons. The latter were making a name for themselves in the Alpha Quadrant, with their aggression and their culture totally based on combat as their primary purpose of life. 10 powerful cruisers, the pride of the people of Kronos, had been easily wiped out as they were preparing to attack what they thought was only a population of flaccid, decadent and inert pacifist ascetics. The pride of the Klingons had been humiliated, but they had begun to respect that perhaps peaceful but certainly not defenseless people. Today the Ducal was only a shadow of the past. Recovered from an orbiting arsenal, where it had been stored for years, it was used as a transport of goods and people between New Vulcan and Earth. Spock had obtained a miserable bunk, lost among dismal empty hangars, ready to be filled once on Earth with all kinds of aid for the Vulcan refugees. Although everyone saw this dependence on the Earth as logical and necessary, the most traditionalists among the survivors, those who struggled to hide their xenophobia, considered it a shameful charity on the part of an emotional and therefore inferior race. An Andorian trader was also traveling on the ship, shy and always careful not to arouse anyone's attention. The Andorian used to meet Spock on the walk. Together they stopped to look out of the single large window at the nothingness beyond it. The ship was moving at warp 3. Earth would not be reached for 4 days.
Spock, I'll be honest, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to tolerate this prosthesis.
Saying this, the Andorian touched his right hand against the cartilaginous antennae protruding from his head.
I've already risked cutting them off several times.
Captain.
The Vulcan stood with his arms folded. He looked into the cosmic void and seemed to be talking to himself.
We have already discussed the need for your presence in disguise.
Of course, of course.
The blue skin was alienating, but the eyes were unquestionably those of Notby, alive and nervous.
In any case, I notice that even in the 30th century humans have not stopped constantly complaining about every little annoyance.
Saying this, Spock slowly turned towards the man of the future, making a strange expression somewhere between bored and condescending. Notby started laughing, this time without worrying too much about not being noticed. Andorians were famous for taking their emotions to extremes in public.
Okay, Ambassador, let's at least hope that this masquerade holds up at customs.
Hours later, Spock sat in a chair in the ship's mess hall, absent-mindedly picking at a disgusting vegetable soup.
Help from Earth, no doubt.
A child's laughter caught his attention. He was probably no more than 3 years old and was playing with an imaginary friend, running around the tables. Enraptured by the scene, he followed the little one in his imaginative evolutions and, while he looked at him, he thought of that same child, today, but in a today of another time. If they had made it, if they had restored the timeline, would that child have always existed? Would he ever be born? What gave them the right to choose for the future of that child and an entire universe?
Tucat.
The child stopped as if a switch had been flipped, remaining still between the tables, waiting. He was joined by a distinguished Vulcan, with a proud and austere appearance.
Tucat, do you want to be the shame of our family? You are behaving in a profoundly stupid, illogical way. You sound like a human.
At this, the child lowered his head and apologized to his father with due ceremony. Spock looked away, but the image of the child remained haunting him for a long time.
The Earth is near.
The Vulcan looked worriedly at the expected arrival time reported by the large clock on the promenade.
Are you ready, Captain?
Notby scratched his head inelegantly, tormented by the constant itching caused by the biomimetic prostheses.
Ambassador, it's my only purpose in life.
We could fail.
We can't, we don't have the right.
This statement is not very logical.
At this response, Notby started to protest but gave up before even opening his mouth.
Of course, Spock. We might fail. Thousands of things can go wrong, starting from the possibility that his trust is misplaced. He could refuse or, even worse, report us. It would be logical, right?
Logical. Perhaps.
Said the old Vulcan.
But too little human for him.
Spock was perplexed once he reached Earth orbit. The Vulcan ship had to wait in a long line before being allowed to teleport its guests to the surface, having a very low priority level compared to the large number of military vessels present around what had become the Federation's lead country. From the bridge, invited by the ship's captain, Spock observed the myriad of acronyms on the radar that unmistakably referred to heavily armed vessels.
The orbit was once traversed by exploration ships.
On the monitors, the old Vulcan saw many ships of the Constitution class, the same as the Enterprise, parading majestically alongside the Ducal, the latter now reduced to a wreck of the past. Technology seemed to have made a quantum leap compared to the same years of his time. The thing itself was not strange. Since the first tragic encounter with Nero's enormous ship, the day J.T. Kirk was born. The Federation's sensors had acquired a myriad of information on the highly advanced technology of the Romulan mining ship, pouring it into the fleet's new starship's design and, above all, their armament. Notby appeared almost suddenly at Spock's side, and it was as if he had read his mind.
I don't believe that the Federation, on the contrary, the Earthlings, have ever had such scientific and military superiority over their potential enemies.
As well as on friends.
Said the Vulcan, with unexpected harshness.
From what I can tell, the exchange of information with the other members of the Federation has become somewhat rarer in recent times.
Spock's thoughts went to the incredible experience he had many years earlier, when the fate of the Enterprise had intersected with that of another Enterprise, representative of a cruel and authoritarian regime, in the so-called Mirror Universe. He pushed the image out of his mind before an irrational fear could take over. The customs procedures were slow and scrupulous. Notby's biomimetic implants easily passed the checks. 30th-century technology was perfectly capable of deceiving them. Spock himself showed off false credentials. The arrival on Earth of the Vulcan from the future would have created too much interest and too many questions. The operators of the arrival terminal showed a poorly concealed contempt towards the Andorian, that is, Captain Notby in disguise. Spock himself felt subject to an annoying attitude of condescension, combined with the curiosity of someone observing an animal in danger of extinction. Hours later, the two were walking down the sidewalks of Boston. Notby was able to regain his human appearance and felt like he was reborn. They were assisted by an invisible personal camouflage field, which offered the myriad of sensors and cameras scattered everywhere two false and potentially harmless identities in the eyes of any inquisitor.
I've been to Earth hundreds of times. But I've never felt like an intruder.
At these words, the captain turned towards the Vulcan.
Something is already changing, Ambassador. The greatness of the Federation also lay in the absolute equality between its members, in the respect that never failed for diversity. Diversity that inspired curiosity and desire for knowledge, never contempt and forced assimilation.
Infinite diversity.
Infinite combinations.
Notby said, finishing Spock's sentence.
The Vulcan IDIC, your philosophy, was one of the cornerstones of the Federation of United Planets. Just as you were the first to invite us among the stars, you equally took us by the hand, teaching us not to deny our being, but, at the same time, you provided us with new tools to manage our exuberance, our emotions and our dark sides. You acted as parents to us, without letting us notice it, until we were adults enough to know how to move alone in the universe. Without ever being truly alone again, because with us there were already legions of other peoples converted to the cause of growth, tolerance, the common good.
Good words, Captain. Thank you.
Spock felt a strong surge of gratitude towards the man who came from such a distant time.
However, even if it is true that my people were capable of great thoughts, don't forget that we too are not totally freed from the beast. Arrogance, sense of superiority and xenophobia have never abandoned us, and I don't know what we would have become without the Federation. And without humans.
That's what we risk seeing soon.
Not be commented.